The dust-laden wind carried the distant rumble of the approaching stagecoach as Isaac Vaughn paced the worn wooden platform of Austin, Texas' small station. His calloused hands repeatedly smoothed down his freshly pressed shirt, an unfamiliar nervousness taking hold as he watched the cloud of dust grow larger on the horizon. It was June 1875, and his mail-order bride from Boston was arriving today, a woman he knew only from 3 exchanged letters and a small daguerreotype showing a delicate face with solemn eyes. Isaac had spent the morning in a state of anxious anticipation. At 32, he had carved out a respectable life for himself, a modest but thriving cattle ranch 10 miles outside of town, a 2-story house he'd expanded with his own hands, and enough saved to ensure comfort. But the loneliness of prairie nights had finally driven him to answer an advertisement in the matrimonial news, corresponding with Miss Nora Thompson, a 24-year-old seamstress from a respectable Boston family. The stagecoach finally rolled to a stop, dust billowing around the wooden wheels. Isaac straightened his hat and stepped forward as the driver secured the brake and jumped down to open the door. 2 businessmen emerged first, followed by an elderly couple. Then, a slender woman in a navy traveling dress appeared at the doorway, her chestnut hair neatly pinned beneath a modest bonnet. Her eyes, the same deep brown as in her photograph, darted nervously around the station. "Miss Thompson," Isaac called, removing his hat and stepping forward with a smile. "I'm Isaac Vaughn." The woman's eyes landed on him, but her expression remained blank. She didn't respond or move toward him. Instead, her knuckles whitened as she gripped her small valise tighter. The stagecoach driver cleared his throat. "Mister, she can't hear you. Been that way the whole journey. Got this, though." He handed Isaac a folded piece of paper. Isaac unfolded it with confusion. The handwriting was elegant but hurried. "To Mr. Vaughn, I regret to inform you that my niece Nora is deaf. Her condition was not mentioned in correspondence as her parents hoped for a miracle cure before her departure. Her hearing was lost last year to scarlet fever. She can read lips somewhat but cannot speak clearly. If this changes your intentions, we understand. She is a good, hard-working girl." Mrs. Alina Whitfield. Isaac looked up from the letter to find Nora still standing frozen by the stagecoach, fear evident in every line of her body. The driver was already unloading her trunk, clearly eager to continue his route. "She's been mighty scared the whole trip," the driver added. "Wouldn't take food from nobody, just kept to herself, writing in a little book." Isaac nodded slowly, processing this unexpected development. He'd imagined their first meeting countless times a shy greeting, perhaps an awkward conversation as they became acquainted. He'd never considered this. He took a deep breath and approached Nora slowly. When he was directly in front of her, he smiled gently and pointed to himself. "Isaac," he mouthed clearly, then pointed to her. Recognition flickered in her eyes. She nodded slightly and pointed to herself. Though she didn't speak, Isaac could see her lips form her name. "Nora," he acknowledged with a nod, then gestured to her trunk and the waiting wagon. "Come," he mouthed, offering his hand. Her eyes studied his face, searching for something, perhaps cruelty or disappointment. Finding neither, she tentatively extended her hand, allowing him to help her down from the stagecoach step. Once on solid ground, she immediately withdrew her hand and clutched her valise protectively against her chest. As they walked to the wagon, Isaac noticed the stares from townsfolk who had gathered to witness the arrival of his mail-order bride. Their whispers weren't lost on him, but Nora, at least, was spared their gossip by her deafness. He helped her into the wagon, careful to telegraph his movements so as not to startle her, then loaded her trunk into the back. As he climbed up beside her, he noticed how she shifted slightly away, maintaining a careful distance. The 10-mile journey to the ranch stretched before them in uncomfortable silence. Isaac, a man accustomed to the quiet of the prairie, found himself wishing desperately for the ability to communicate. Nora kept her gaze fixed on the passing landscape, her posture rigid with tension. About halfway to the ranch, he noticed a tear sliding down her cheek. She quickly brushed it away, but more followed. Isaac pulled the wagon to a stop and reached into his pocket, offering her a clean handkerchief. Startled by the wagon's halt, Nora looked at him with wide, fearful eyes before noticing the handkerchief. After a moment's hesitation, she accepted it, dabbing at her tears. From her reticule, she produced a small notebook and pencil. With trembling hands, she wrote something and passed it to him. "Are you angry that I am deaf? Will you send me back?" The raw fear in those words struck Isaac like a physical blow. He shook his head emphatically and took the pencil, writing beneath her question, "No, you are welcome here. We will find a way." A flicker of relief crossed her features, but the fear remained. She wrote again, "I can work hard. I am a good seamstress." Isaac's heart ached at her desperate attempt to prove her worth. He wrote back, "You are not here as a servant, you came as my wife. We will learn together." She read his words, uncertainty clouding her expression. After a moment's thought, she wrote, "I cannot hear. I cannot speak well. How can I be a proper wife?" Isaac considered her question carefully. He'd never met a deaf person before, and he had no idea how to navigate this situation. But looking at her frightened, vulnerable, and far from everything familiar, he knew he couldn't add to her burden. He wrote, "I do not know yet, but we will find our way." The rest of the journey passed in silence, but occasionally, Isaac would point out landmarks: the creek that ran through his property, the distant hills where his cattle grazed, and finally, as they crested a small rise, his ranch house standing solid against the vast Texas sky. The 2-story white clapboard house sat nestled among several cottonwood trees, with a wide porch wrapping around the front and one side. A barn and several outbuildings stood nearby, and a corral held 3 horses who raised their heads at the wagon's approach. As Isaac helped Nora down from the wagon, he noticed how she took in everything with wide, observant eyes. For the first time, her expression held something beyond fear, perhaps a flicker of curiosity. He carried her trunk inside, showing her through the house the parlor with its stone fireplace, the kitchen with its cast iron stove, the dining room with the oak table he'd crafted himself. Upstairs, he led her to a bedroom with a 4-poster bed covered in a quilt and fresh linens. Isaac gestured to the room, then to her. Nora nodded her understanding this would be her room. He pointed to a door across the hall, indicating his own quarters. From her valise, she produced her notebook again and wrote a question. "When will the ceremony be?" Isaac paused, considering. In his plans, they would have been married immediately after her arrival, but now he wondered if that would only add to her fear. He wrote back, "Whenever you are ready, you should rest first." Relief softened her features. She nodded gratefully. Isaac left her to settle in, carrying water upstairs for her to freshen up after her long journey. As he went about his evening chores, feeding the horses and checking on his small herd of cattle in the nearest pasture, he couldn't stop thinking about the woman now in his home. She wasn't what he'd expected, this silent, frightened creature so far from her home. The letters they'd exchanged had given no hint of her condition, instead portraying a proper Boston lady with a gentle wit and practical nature. Now he wondered if she'd even written those letters herself, or if her aunt had penned them on her behalf. By the time he returned to the house, dusk was settling over the prairie. He found Nora in the kitchen, attempting to prepare a meal from the supplies in his pantry. She'd changed into a simpler dress, her hair now loosely braided down her back. Isaac touched her arm gently to get her attention, and she startled, nearly dropping the pan she held. He stepped back immediately, giving her space, and pointed to himself, then to the stove, indicating he would cook. She shook her head and gestured to herself, then the stove. From her pocket, she produced her notebook and wrote, "I should earn my keep." Isaac frowned and wrote back, "You do not need to earn your place here. We will share the work." Something shifted in her expression, surprise, perhaps, or disbelief. After a moment's hesitation, she nodded and allowed him to help with the meal preparation. They worked side by side, communicating through gestures and occasional written notes. Though awkward, they managed to prepare a simple supper of beans, cornbread, and bacon. As they ate, Isaac noticed how Nora watched his face whenever he moved his lips, as though trying to read whatever he might be saying. On impulse, he pointed to his coffee cup and mouthed the word clearly. "Coffee," she repeated, her voice slightly muffled and the pronunciation not quite right, but understandable. Isaac nodded encouragingly and pointed to the bread. "Cornbread," she said, the words less distinct but still recognizable. A small smile, the first he'd seen, briefly touched her lips at his obvious approval. It transformed her face, revealing a dimple in her right cheek that hadn't been visible in her photograph. After dinner, they sat in the parlor, the awkwardness between them palpable. Nora wrote in her notebook and passed it to him. "I should explain. I could hear until last year. Scarlet fever took my hearing. I can still speak, but I am told my voice sounds strange now, so I rarely use it. I can read lips somewhat if people speak slowly and clearly." Isaac nodded in understanding and wrote back, "I will try to speak clearly for you, but we might need another way to communicate when lip reading is difficult." Nora hesitated before writing again, her pencil pressing firmly against the paper. "There is a language of hand signs that deaf people use. I learned some in Boston at a school for the deaf. It is called sign language." Isaac leaned forward with interest. "Can you teach me?" he wrote. The request seemed to surprise her. She looked at him for a long moment before responding. "It would take time." "We have time," he wrote back. That night, as Isaac lay in his bed across the hall from Nora's room, he contemplated the unexpected turn his life had taken. He'd wanted a partner, someone to share his days and warm his nights, someone to help build a future on this land he loved. Instead, he had a frightened stranger who couldn't hear his voice, couldn't share casual conversation, and who clearly viewed him with wary suspicion. Yet there was something about her quiet dignity that touched him. The courage it must have taken to travel across the country to marry a stranger, especially with her condition, spoke of remarkable strength. In the darkness, Isaac made a decision. He would learn to communicate with Nora. He would show her that she had nothing to fear from him, and perhaps, in time, they might build something real between them. The next morning, Isaac rose early as was his habit. He tended to the animals and collected eggs from the chicken coop before returning to the house. To his surprise, Nora was already awake, her hair neatly arranged, wearing a simple blue dress. She had prepared coffee and was mixing batter for biscuits. He touched the edge of the table to draw her attention without startling her. When she looked up, he smiled and mouthed "Good morning" with exaggerated clarity. "Good morning," she replied aloud, her voice hesitant but the words intelligible. They fell into a pattern of gestures and written notes as they prepared breakfast together. After they'd eaten, Isaac showed her around the property, the vegetable garden that needed attention, the orchard with its small crop of apples and peaches, the stream that provided water year-round. Nora watched everything with keen interest, occasionally writing questions in her notebook. When they returned to the house, she wrote a longer message. I would like to help with the garden. In Boston, we had only window boxes, but I have read about growing vegetables. Isaac nodded encouragingly, then reached for the notebook. The garden would be yours to tend. My mother kept one years ago, but since she died, it has been neglected. I have only grown the essentials. As the day progressed, Isaac noticed Nora's shoulders gradually relaxing, her movements becoming less guarded. That evening, after supper, she brought out a slim book from her trunk, the American Sign Language Manual. "Will you learn with me?" she wrote, an uncertain hope in her eyes. Isaac nodded without hesitation. "Show me how to begin." Nora opened the book to the first pages, which illustrated hand positions for the alphabet. She demonstrated the sign for A, forming her hand into a fist with her thumb resting against the side. Isaac mimicked her motion, his large, work-roughened hands looking awkward attempting the precise position. Nora reached out tentatively to adjust his fingers, then quickly withdrew her hand as if the brief contact had burned her. They spent an hour working through the alphabet, Isaac practicing each letter until Nora nodded her approval. By the time they retired for the night, he could clumsily finger-spell his name and hers. Over the next days, a routine began to take shape. Mornings, Isaac would handle the ranch work while Nora tended to the house and began reclaiming the garden from weeds. Afternoons often found them working side by side on various tasks. Each evening, they would practice signing for an hour or more. A week after her arrival, Isaac rode into town for supplies, leaving Nora alone at the ranch for the first time. In Austin, he made an additional stop at the town's small bookshop, where he purchased 2 more books on sign language and a journal for himself to practice in. The shopkeeper raised his eyebrows. "Heard your mail-order bride came in deaf and dumb," he commented, wrapping the books in brown paper. "Tough luck, Vaughn." Isaac felt a surge of protective anger. "She's deaf, not dumb," he corrected sharply. "She's smart as a whip and braver than most men I know." The shopkeeper looked taken aback. "No offense meant," he muttered, handing over the package. When Isaac returned home, he found Nora sitting on the porch steps, her face wet with tears. She jumped up when she saw him, relief evident in her expression. In her hand was a piece of paper filled with frantic writing. "You left. I thought you weren't coming back." Isaac shook his head firmly and set down his packages to free his hands. Slowly, he finger-spelled. "IWILLALWAYSCOMEBACK." The clumsiness of his signing and the earnestness of his expression drew a watery smile from Nora. She nodded and wiped her tears, then noticed the package from the bookshop. Her eyes widened as he unwrapped the additional sign language books. That evening, as they practiced with the new materials, Isaac learned to sign a phrase he'd been practicing in secret. "YOURESFEHERE." When Nora recognized the words his hands were forming, tears welled in her eyes again. She hesitated, then signed back, her movements fluid and graceful compared to his awkward attempts. "Thank you." It was the first time she'd signed to him beyond demonstrations from the book, and Isaac felt an unexpected surge of emotion at this small but significant gesture of trust. 2 weeks after Nora's arrival, they rode into town together. They still hadn't discussed when or if they would marry, and Isaac was content to let her set the pace. For now, he introduced her to townspeople simply as Miss Thompson, my house guest from Boston. Some folks were awkwardly polite, others openly curious about her deafness. A few women from the church approached with friendly overtures, but most interactions were strained by the communication barrier. Throughout it all, Isaac remained protectively at Nora's side, occasionally interpreting through rudimentary sign language and written notes. At the general store, While Nora examined fabric for new curtains, Isaac overheard two men talking in low voices. "Vaughn's got himself a defective mail-order bride," one said with a snicker. "Must have been desperate to keep her." Before Isaac could respond, the storekeeper's wife, Mrs. Abernathy, a stern woman with silver-streaked hair, intervened. "That's quite enough," she scolded. "The poor girl lost her hearing to illness, not that it's any of your business. And she's got more grace in her little finger than you've got in your entire body, Hank Miller." Isaac gave Mrs. Abernathy a grateful nod, which she acknowledged with a sniff, before bustling away to help Nora with the fabric. On the ride home, Isaac could sense Nora's exhaustion. The strain of trying to communicate in town had clearly taken its toll. When they reached the ranch, he helped her down from the wagon and impulsively signed HOME, followed by SAFE. Nora looked at the house, then back at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. She nodded slowly and signed back, "Home." As May turned to June, the tentative rhythm of their life together began to feel more natural. Isaac's signing improved daily, and he found himself thinking in signs even when Nora wasn't present. For her part, Nora grew more comfortable using her voice around him, though she still preferred to sign when possible. The garden flourished under her care, rows of vegetables sprouting in the rich soil. Inside the house, small touches reflected her presence: curtains she had sewn, wildflowers arranged in mason jars, and books neatly stacked by the fireplace. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the Texas sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, Nora handed Isaac a note. "You have been very patient. I am ready to discuss our arrangement." Isaac looked at her questioningly. She took a deep breath and signed, her movements deliberate and precise. "Do you still want to marry me, now that you know about my deafness?" Isaac didn't hesitate. He signed back, "Yes, if you want to marry me." Nora studied his face for a long moment before responding. "Why?" "Most men would not want a deaf wife." Isaac considered his answer carefully, wanting to express himself clearly. He began to sign, supplementing with writing when the signs he knew weren't sufficient. "When I sent for a mail-order bride, I wanted a partner, someone to share this life with me. Your deafness doesn't change that. These weeks together have shown me your strength, your intelligence, your kindness. I would be proud to have you as my wife." Tears gathered in Nora's eyes as she read his words. "I was afraid," she signed. "Afraid you kept me out of duty. Afraid no one would ever want me now that I cannot hear." Isaac reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished, and took her hand. "I want you," he signed with his free hand. "Not out of duty, out of respect, out of—" He paused, searching for the right sign, then simply finger-spelled, CARING. Nora's fingers tightened around his and she nodded. "Then yes," she signed. "I will marry you." The following Sunday they were married in a small ceremony at the town's church. The preacher, who had been practicing with Isaac, included some basic signs alongside his spoken words so Nora could follow along. Mrs. Abernathy from the general store had rallied several of the town's women to attend, showing their support despite initial awkwardness. When it came time for their vows, Isaac surprised Nora by signing his promises alongside speaking them, his movements confident after hours of secret practice. Tears flowed freely down Nora's cheeks as she signed her vows in return, her voice accompanying the graceful movements of her hands. That night, as husband and wife, they faced each other with new shyness in the bedroom that was now theirs to share. Isaac had moved Nora's belongings earlier that day, but now the reality of their changed relationship hung between them. Nora's hands trembled slightly as she signed, "I have never." "I don't know how." Isaac nodded in understanding. He signed back, "We can wait. There is no hurry, but Nora shook her head. "I want to be your wife in all ways. I just need you to be patient, to help me understand." With infinite gentleness, Isaac guided Nora through their first night together. He was careful to always remain where she could see his face, to telegraph his movements so she was never startled. When words failed, touch became its own language, one they learned together, slowly and with increasing confidence. Afterward, as they lay tangled in the sheets, Nora rested her head against Isaac's chest. Though she couldn't hear his heartbeat, she could feel its steady rhythm against her cheek. For the first time since losing her hearing, she felt not merely accommodated, but truly accepted. As summer stretched into fall, the ranch prospered under their joint efforts. Isaac had never realized how much more efficient his work could become with a partner. Nora proved to have a keen mind for organization and planning, keeping meticulous records of expenses and cattle counts in a ledger she devised. Together, they expanded the garden, preserving vegetables and fruits for the coming winter. Isaac built additional shelves in the root cellar to accommodate the bounty, while Nora sewed warm quilts for the colder months ahead. Their signing improved to the point where they rarely needed to write notes, developing shortcuts and personal signs that formed a private language between them. In the evenings, Isaac would often read aloud from novels or newspapers, signing key words so Nora could follow along. Sometimes, she would rest her fingertips lightly against his throat as he read, feeling the vibrations of his voice. In October, they hosted their first dinner guests, the Abernathys from the general store and the new schoolteacher, Miss Ellison, who had studied at a school for the deaf in New York before moving west. The evening marked a turning point in Nora's comfort with the community, especially when Miss Ellison offered to help establish a small class to teach signing to interested townspeople. "It would be good for the children to learn as well," Miss Ellison suggested, signing simultaneously for Nora's benefit. "Many skills are useful on the frontier, and the ability to communicate silently could serve them well." Isaac watched with pride as Nora engaged confidently with their guests, her initial fear of social situations gradually giving way to a quiet self-assurance. Later that night, as they prepared for bed, Nora approached Isaac with unusual seriousness. She sat him down on the edge of the bed and stood before him, her hands moving with deliberate precision. "I need to tell you something important," she signed. Isaac felt a flutter of concern. "What is it?" Nora took a deep breath. "I believe I am with child." For a moment, Isaac stared at her in stunned silence. Then he leapt to his feet with a whoop of joy that Nora couldn't hear but could certainly see. He lifted her off her feet in a gentle embrace, his face alight with happiness. When he set her down, his hands moved rapidly. "Are you certain? How long have you known? How do you feel?" Nora laughed at his barrage of questions, a clear, joyful sound that she released without self-consciousness. "Not entirely certain," she signed, "but I have missed my monthly time twice now and I feel different. Mrs. Abernathy suspected when she saw me turn pale at the smell of coffee last week." Isaac dropped to his knees before her, placing his hands reverently on her still flat abdomen. He looked up at her with wonder and signed, "Our child." Nora nodded, placing her hands over his. "I am scared," she admitted. "How will I hear the baby cry?" Isaac stood and took her hands. "We will find a way," he promised. "Perhaps a dog trained to alert you or a bell system with strings to the cradle. We will solve this together." That night, as Nora slept peacefully beside him, Isaac lay awake planning modifications to the house that would help a deaf mother care for an infant. By morning, he had sketched designs for a system of floor vibrations that would alert Nora to the baby's cries from any room in the house. The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the winter months. The ranch was snug and well provisioned. allowing Isaac and Nora to weather the season's storms in comfort. On evenings when the wind howled outside, they would sit before the fireplace while Isaac read aloud from medical texts about childbirth and infant care, signing the information for Nora. In January, a traveling doctor passed through Austin, and Isaac persuaded him to visit the ranch to check on Nora. The doctor, a gruff older man named Simmons, initially seemed uncomfortable with Nora's deafness, but was won over by her intelligence and the clear devotion between the couple. "The baby appears healthy," Dr. Simmons declared after examining Nora. "Due in early spring, I'd say. April, most likely." He hesitated, then added, "I've delivered babies for women with various challenges before. With proper preparation, there's no reason your deafness should prevent you from being an excellent mother, Mrs. Vaughn." Nora's face brightened at his matter-of-fact assessment. She had been worrying privately about her ability to care for an infant she couldn't hear, and the doctor's confidence was reassuring. As her body changed with the growing child, Isaac found himself even more in awe of his wife's strength. She continued to work alongside him as much as possible, adapting her routines to accommodate her changing center of gravity. In the evenings, Isaac would often find her sewing tiny garments or working on a special cradle quilt, her face serene in the lamplight. One night in late February, a fierce blizzard descended upon the ranch. The wind screamed around the eaves and snow piled against the doors and windows. Isaac had spent hours ensuring the livestock were securely sheltered before returning to the house, half frozen despite his heavy coat. Nora met him with dry clothes and hot coffee, her expression concerned as she took in his exhausted state. As the evening wore on, the storm intensified. Around midnight, a particularly violent gust rattled the windows, and suddenly Nora sat bolt upright in bed, her hand flying to her abdomen. "What is it?" Isaac signed frantically, fear gripping him at her alarmed expression. Nora's eyes were wide with wonder, not pain. She took his hand and placed it on the swell of her belly. Beneath his palm, Isaac felt a distinct movement, their child kicking for the first time. "I felt it," Nora signed, tears of joy streaming down her face. "I cannot hear, but I can feel our baby moving inside me." Isaac gathered her close, his own eyes damp with emotion. In that moment, as the storm raged outside while they marveled at the life they'd created, he knew a completeness he had never imagined possible before Nora came into his life. The following week brought an unexpected visitor to the ranch. Isaac was mending a fence when he spotted a rider approaching through the late winter landscape. As the figure drew closer, he recognized Jeremiah Foster, the owner of the neighboring ranch 5 miles east. "Vaughn," Foster called as he dismounted. "Got yourself in a bit of trouble, I hear." Isaac straightened, immediately wary. "What kind of trouble would that be, Foster?" "Word in town is your bride's family is looking for her. Some fancy Boston lawyer's been asking questions, saying she was taken advantage of on account of her condition." Foster removed his hat and slapped it against his leg. "Thought you should know." Isaac's blood ran cold. What exactly did this lawyer say? That the girl was sent west after losing her hearing, that her parents never intended her to marry. Foster shrugged. "Said the aunt acted without authority, that they want their daughter back." Isaac thanked Foster for the warning and immediately headed back to the house. He found Nora in the kitchen, kneading bread dough, her movements peaceful and rhythmic. When she looked up and saw his expression, her hand stilled immediately. "What's wrong?" she signed, flour dusting her fingers. Isaac hesitated, not wanting to upset her in her condition but knowing he couldn't keep this from her. "There is a lawyer in town," he signed. "From Boston. He says your family is looking for you, that they didn't want you to marry." Nora's face drained of color. She wiped her hands and signed rapidly. My father sent me away. After my hearing was lost, he said I had become a burden. My aunt suggested the mail-order arrangement as a solution. She believed I could have a better life here than as an object of pity in Boston. Did your father know about the arrangement? Isaac asked. Nora's expression hardened. He knew. He paid for my journey, he said. Her hands faltered briefly. He said a deaf daughter was of no use to him in Boston society, that perhaps in the West my disability would matter less. Anger flared in Isaac's chest at the callousness of a father who could discard his daughter so easily. And now he wants you back. Nora shook her head. Not my father, he would never. Understanding dawned in her eyes. My mother. She was in Europe when I was sent away. She must have returned and discovered what happened. The next day, Isaac rode into town to learn more. At the hotel, he found Edward Blackstone, a stern-faced lawyer from Boston who confirmed Nora's suspicion. Mrs. Thompson was abroad when her husband made this arrangement, Blackstone explained, distaste evident in his tone. Upon her return and discovery of her daughter's whereabouts, she was understandably distraught. Mr. Thompson had led her to believe Nora was at a special school for the deaf. "And what does Mrs. Thompson want now?" Isaac asked, struggling to keep his voice level. "She wants her daughter returned to Boston immediately. The marriage, if indeed there was one, would be easily annulled given Miss Thompson's condition and the deceptive circumstances." Isaac's hands clenched at his sides. "Mrs. Vaughn, not Miss Thompson, is my legal wife. She is carrying my child. She is not returning to Boston." Blackstone's eyebrows rose slightly. "A child complicates matters," he admitted. "However, Mrs. Thompson is prepared to be generous. She understands that you took her daughter in good faith and would provide compensation for any inconvenience." "My wife is not for sale," Isaac said coldly, "and I suggest you speak with her directly before making further assumptions about what she wants." Blackstone agreed to ride out to the ranch the following day. That evening, Isaac explained the situation fully to Nora, watching her face carefully for any sign that she might wish to return to her former life. "You want to see this lawyer," he signed. "You don't have to. I can send him away." Nora shook her head firmly. "I will see him. My mother should know that I am happy, that I have chosen this life." She placed a protective hand over her growing belly. "This is my family now." When Blackstone arrived the next morning, Isaac showed him into the parlor where Nora waited, composed and dignified despite her obvious pregnancy. Isaac sat beside her, ready to interpret if necessary. To their surprise, Blackstone produced a letter written in an elegant hand Nora's mother. Nora read it silently, tears gathering in her eyes. "My mother writes that she never knew of Father's plans," she signed to Isaac. "She returned from Europe to find me gone with only a vague explanation. She has been searching for months." Blackstone watched their signed exchange with obvious fascination. "Mrs. Thompson was unaware of your father's true feelings about your condition," he said, speaking slowly and clearly for Nora's benefit. "She was devastated to learn how you had been sent away." Nora nodded, then took up pen and paper to communicate directly with Blackstone. "Please tell my mother that I am well. I have a good husband and a home where I am valued. I am expecting a child in April. I do not wish to return to Boston." Blackstone read her note with a thoughtful expression. "Mrs. Thompson will be relieved to know you are safe and, apparently, content. She had feared the worst when she learned of your father's arrangement. My marriage was unexpected," Nora wrote, "but it has brought me happiness I never thought possible after losing my hearing. Please help my mother understand." For the next hour, Blackstone asked questions about their life, observing how Isaac and Nora communicated, noting the obvious care between them. By the time he departed, his initial skepticism had visibly softened. "I will convey your situation accurately to Mrs. Thompson," he promised. "I believe she will respect your wishes, though I expect she will want to establish some form of correspondence." After Blackstone's departure, Nora wept in Isaac's arms, not from distress, but from the relief of finally closing that chapter of her life, and the hope of reconnecting with the mother who had truly cared for her. 2 weeks later, a package arrived from Boston containing letters from Nora's mother, several books on raising children, and a beautiful hand-knitted baby blanket. The accompanying note expressed Mrs. Thompson's desire to visit after the baby was born, if Nora was amenable. As March turned to April, the ranch burst into spring bloom, mirroring the sense of renewal that permeated their lives. Nora's time grew near, and Isaac installed his floor vibration system throughout the house, leather straps stretched beneath the floorboards, connected to the cradle, that would vibrate when the baby's movement set them off. On April 12, 1876, Nora went into labor. Mrs. Abernathy and Miss Ellison came to assist, along with Dr. Simmons, who had returned to town just days before. Isaac refused to leave Nora's side, signing encouragement and wiping her brow as she labored through the night. Shortly after dawn, their son was born, a robust, healthy boy with a shock of dark hair and a powerful set of lungs. Isaac cried unashamedly as he placed the swaddled infant in Nora's arms. Though she couldn't hear his cries, she could feel them against her chest as she held him close. "What shall we name him?" Isaac signed. Nora studied their son's face. "Matthew," she signed back. "It means gift from God." As spring turned to summer, life on the Vaughn ranch settled into a new rhythm centered around young Matthew's needs. Isaac's alert system worked remarkably well, allowing Nora to respond quickly when the baby cried. She proved to be a natural mother, attuned to her child's needs through visual cues and touch. In July, Nora's mother arrived from Boston, a nervous but determined woman who bore a striking resemblance to her daughter. The initial awkwardness quickly gave way to a tentative reconciliation, as Mrs. Thompson witnessed the life Nora had built and fell instantly in love with her grandson. "Your father was wrong," Mrs. Thompson confessed one evening, Miss Ellison interpreting her words into sign. "He thought he was protecting you from a harsh world, but instead he tried to hide you away. I will never forgive him for that, though I understand he acted from his own fear." Nora's hands moved gracefully as she responded, "I have found my place here. What seemed like abandonment led me to where I belong." As Mrs. Thompson prepared to return to Boston the following week, she embraced Isaac with genuine affection. "Thank you," she said simply, "for seeing my daughter's worth when others, including her own father, could not." The years that followed brought both challenges and joys to the Vaughn family. Matthew grew into a bright, energetic boy who moved fluidly between the spoken and signed worlds. By age 3, he was interpreting for his mother when needed, his small hands forming signs with impressive precision. In 1878, their family expanded with the birth of twin girls Emma and Sarah, who arrived during a spectacular thunderstorm that rattled the windows, but couldn't disturb the peaceful intensity of the birthing room where Isaac once again stood steadfastly by Nora's side. By 1880, their cattle operation had grown substantially, allowing them to build a larger, more comfortable house with special features designed for a deaf mother: flashing lights connected to doorbells, strategically placed mirrors to expand Nora's visual field, and smooth, vibration-conducting floors throughout. That year also brought an unexpected development to Austin. A school for deaf children opened on the edge of town, with Miss Ellison as its first teacher. Nora was invited to serve on its board and teach sign language classes to parents and siblings of deaf students. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Isaac presented Nora with a special gift, a journal containing entries he had written every day since her arrival. He had chronicled their journey from strangers to lovers to parents, documenting his own transformation from a lonely rancher to a man fulfilled by family and purpose. "When you first arrived," he signed as she turned the pages with wonder, "I knew only that you couldn't hear. I didn't yet understand all that you would help me to see." Nora looked up from the journal, her eyes bright with emotion. "When I stepped off that stagecoach," she signed, "I was certain my life was over. I could never have imagined how it was just beginning." Isaac drew her close, his hands forming the signs that had become as natural to him as breathing. "You're safe here. You're loved here. Always." In the fall of 1885, 10 years after Nora had first arrived in Texas, they hosted a celebration at the ranch. The gathering included neighbors, friends from town, students and teachers from the deaf school, and family from as far away as Boston. Matthew, now 9, and the 7-year-old twins moved confidently among the guests, switching effortlessly between signed and spoken conversations. During the festivities, Isaac noticed Nora standing alone on the porch, watching the sunset paint the Texas sky in shades of gold and crimson. He joined her, touching her arm gently to gain her attention. "Happy?" he signed, the simple question containing a decade of shared history. Nora smiled, the expression lighting her face just as it had the first time he'd seen it across the dinner table so many years ago. She reached up to touch his cheek, now lined with the evidence of laughter and Texas sun. "Beyond words," she signed, then added with the voice she now used confidently with him, "beyond signs." As twilight settled over the ranch that had become so much more than either of them had ever expected, Isaac and Nora Vaughn stood side by side, their hands linked, their hearts connected by a language far deeper than speech, a language they had created together. Sign by sign, day by day, year by year. The journey that had begun with fear and uncertainty had led them here. To a home filled with love, to children who bridged 2 worlds, to a community that had learned to see beyond difference, and to a partnership that had transformed them both. Behind them, the laughter and movement of their celebration continued, a testament to the life they had built from an unexpected beginning. Before them stretched the vast Texas horizon, promising many more sunsets to share, many more signs to exchange, many more moments to cherish in the eloquent silence they had learned to fill with meaning.